Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us here. I'm going to start with, I think, some kind of quick introductions. Why don't we start, Ann, down here, a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Sure. Sounds good. So I'm Ann Thymé-Gobbel. I've been doing voice-related UI, UX, natural language understanding kind of work my whole career, basically. I come out of in school, I was doing linguistics and cognitive science, and it's now the perfect place to start for where we're at today with all of voice and natural language. So I've been doing both professional services, R&D work, product development. I've been at Amazon. I've been at Nuance for many years at small startups. And right now I'm at Sound United, which is the company that has Polk, Marantz, Denon audio equipment.
All right, thanks, Ann.
My name is Oonie Chase. I've been doing user experience design for far longer than I care to admit. I'm currently at Frog Design, and if you don't know what Frog Design is, we are a design studio and consultancy. We were founded about 50 years ago, basically by Steve Jobs when he hired Hartmut Esslinger to come and design the form of the first Apple computers and the digital language of the Apple computers. And today we work in physical systems, so we do industrial design, space design, digital systems, and human systems, and everything in between and around that.
I'm Dave Lippman, Vice President of User Experience at eBay. I oversee a team of about 150 people who are joined at the hip to make sure all of eBay's experiences are coherent across every customer touch point. And before that, I was a creative director at Apple, working on the e-commerce side of things.
Hi, my name is Sandeep Datar. I'm currently VP of UX and Design at Oracle. I lead the design team for their marketing applications, marketing automation. I started my career designing motorcycles and come from an industrial design background. And since then, I have worked on a lot of products, hardware and software. I worked previously at Yahoo and Symantec, and also at enterprise products like Juniper Networks.
And hi, my name is Giubileo. I'm currently with Accenture as a managing director in our product engineering and lifecycle services practice. But I've spent 28, I'll say it out loud, 28 years in the high-tech industry building products at companies like EMC, Dell, Computer Associates, BEA, and a few others. So we have an incredible panel here today with a lot of experience and user experience. So hopefully, you stick around towards the end and ask some really, really good questions. I was sitting in the speaker's room listening and learning a tremendous amount, and I've been in this field for, seems like forever. So with that, I have a couple kind of questions, those softballs I'll just kind of throw out there to you guys and pick different people, and then we'll see where it kind of goes from there. But so Oonie,
Boy.
this is really easy, and if you don't know this, I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. But what does user experience mean for you? You're part of a firm, and you were sharing with us a lot of different concepts that you guys do. So what does that mean for you?
Oh my God. Depends what perspective I'm looking at it from.
That's why I ask you.
Yeah, I know. On its face, user experience is how your customer, however you define that person, experiences your company or your product. I say company first because it's more than just your product. It's how they interact with your service people. It's how they interact with all parts of your brand. But underneath that, it is an orchestration of all the different delivery systems that ladder up to that user experience that's really the tip of a larger iceberg. So it's both the experience itself and the orchestration of the system that gives that experience.
Sandeep, you come from a different perspective, right? You're part of the industry with Oracle.
Yeah.
I mean, what does it mean for a company like Oracle and for your role?
So I think I would like to start by saying that first thing that everybody should get right is user experience is not limited to the UI. And whether you're talking about UI of a software product or you're talking about a physical product, like first thing that meets your eye, I think a lot of time people misunderstand user experience for the UI. And to me, it is everything that deals with the user's touch point, ranging from how fast is it to install and start using the product, how easy it is to learn the product. If I run into a customer support issue, how quickly do I get help? So it's a broad range of spectrum, not just the UI. I think that's probably one key call out that I would like to do.
Yep. I would agree. I mean, I think a lot of people would argue that the user experience starts the first day a salesperson calls on them,
Yeah.
right? I know you guys, and probably a lot of the folks here don't think of it that way, but it's cradle to grave, right, of how they experience you.
I think it starts with what you name.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it starts right there.
Yep.
One of the things just on our side, following on what you were saying, Sandeep, we have a similar challenge where it's, what is the user interface? And the way we like to talk about it at eBay is what happens after you click the button, right? So after you hit buy, what are all the things that happen behind the scenes is just as much of a user experience and a customer experience as when you actually are interfacing with the product. And it sort of it helps to open people's minds as to how to think about a customer and how to think about you deliver across all those different kinds of touch points or lack of touch points.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, you hit the buy button, if your expectation is that it's going to be there in 2 days and it shows up in 4,
Yeah.
chances are you didn't have a positive user experience, right?
Yep.
And so what causes that delay and that commit and everything behind it? So.
One more thing I would like to add is very often when people think of user experience, they think about the use cases and the user journey. And it's important to note that what users expect on day 1 of the use of your product versus day 10 and day 100, it's very different. And oftentimes, especially enterprise products are designed for the day 100 scenario. They're not designed for the day 1 scenario, and that is where I think customers end up having a bad experience, and that perception lasts for a very long time.
Yeah. Ann, you work in kind of a interesting, and I'll say, where everything's kind of going, and reasons why I can't say certain women's names in my house because
exactly.
some device picks up, right? I mean, what's it mean to you, right?
It's really interesting since we have actually quite a different background between us, but I think we all feel that UX is exactly that. It's this all-encompassing, cradle-to-grave, everything. I mean, that in speech, what you'd see, I like to explain sometimes the voice modality more like a 3-legged stool. You have the recognition, you have the language understanding, intent part, and the actual sort of response and delivery of them. And all the user sees is the seat, right? And if they don't get what they want, they fall over, and they don't care what happened. So just because you have good recognition, and recognition is getting better and better, but other things are very difficult. And I mean, you can see this all the time. I mean, those unnameable devices that we can talk about here because they're not here.
There's probably
Alexa,
a couple in here that if
yeah,
you said
exactly.
the name, it would pick up.
I won't see that
so.
one. I mean, if I say things like, Alexa, turn on the living room light, and she says okay, but doesn't do it, then I'm not very happy, right? If she understood what I said, but something went wrong. Or if I say, play Enter Sandman by Metallica, and I get the bluegrass version, which is a really awesome version, but probably not what I had in mind, right? That's a fail, right? So there are all these places where things can fail along the way, and that, the UX, the good user experience is everywhere. It's all
By the
along.
way, I have 3 daughters and a wife, and when I ask another woman in the house to turn the light on, and they don't, it's normal, right? Nobody listens to me anyway, so anyways. Different type of question here. What happens when you guys don't get it right for your company or your clients, right? I mean, what's the impact? If you get it right or if you get it wrong, right? I mean, what do you think is the impact of good or bad user experience? Dave,
I could
I'll ask
I could
you,
talk
yeah.
to eBay. You break the cash register. That's a really simple way to put it. Is if you get it wrong, you potentially impact the business in a really negative way from a profit and a revenue perspective. I think one of the ways that we try to think about that, and my team and the larger company, and I think it's generally true with all sort of software and user experience design, is you don't know. You don't know what's right. It's the foundation for an experimentation for every experimentation framework is that you just don't know. And if you go into it with that mindset, we kind of joke around that our team is wrong at least 80% of the time. And if you go into it with that mindset, it sort of changes your posture in terms of how you approach problem solving. And it forces you to be iterative. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing for us is we want to get to the right answer as fast as possible. It's a cliche to say that, but when you take that kind of iterative approach and sort of build it into your, just even to the hypothesis that there's a high likelihood that you're going to be wrong, you tend to take different approaches.
Yeah. And I guess you mentioned it, you don't know, but I mean, how do you guys think about measuring user experience, right? I mean, there's a lot of different ways, and every one of you come from a different perspective. So, Sandeep, I'll start with you, but we can, I think each one of you guys will bring a different kind of perspective to that.
Sure. So I think when I worked at Yahoo, we had very clear metrics defined for what defines user engagement. And if you think of Yahoo search as a product or Google search as a product, how many times users come back and use your product? How much time do they spend once they come on your product? So those are sort of easy to measure metrics, primarily because these products are like in the cloud. I mean, they've always been in the cloud, like search and these kind of products. So you have built-in telemetry where you could measure these. But when it comes to enterprise products, till recently, a lot of enterprise products have been deployed on premise, and there was a very hard way to collect that information. So a lot of enterprise products relied on what we call as qualitative data to tell us whether they like something or not, whether they find a product or a feature useful or not. So, but with a lot of enterprise products now moving to the cloud, there is a way to gather telemetry data and define your metrics around what defines better experience. And lastly, in terms of enterprise products, most of these are catered to solving some user problem where a user comes in, does his task and goes away. So fastest time to task in the least number of steps are like good metrics to start with.
And Dave, I guess kind of same question. I mean, we had an interesting conversation about data, right? Can you trust it? Oonie, I mean, you had a great perspective, and I want you to share that too, but Dave, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think for anything in our category of what we're doing, understanding what is happening is only good if you understand why. And that convergence or that triangulation is really the secret sauce of how you actually know what you're doing and if it's going to work and how it's going to work. So, and some of the challenges that go along with that are oftentimes, if there's leading and lagging indicators in terms of how you make decisions from a generative or evaluative standpoint, oftentimes the qualitative understanding the why happens at the beginning of the process, and then the lagging indicators, which answer the what, are at the end of the process. And you can get yourself into a little bit of a bind where you don't understand what the problem is or what the solution is earlier on. And so we're in the process of defining some new ways to create leading indicators that are statistically significant so that we understand the what and the why at the beginning of a process or earlier on in the process as opposed to further back after we've launched something.
Oonie, you're kind of like me, right? You come from a consultative kind of background in company. I mean, how do you help your clients kind of think through this? How to how to measure.
Lots of drinks. As you guys were talking, I was at Wieden and Kennedy for a time, which is a big advertising company, and the head of strategy used to say, people lie. That was like his opening mantra, that people lie. And then I come to Frog, which is user-centered, and so we look at qualitative and quantitative, but the triangulation piece is what people tell you that they do, what people do, which is the data, the contrail that comes off the back, and then what you observe people do. And the truth lies somewhere in between that. But very often I think the thing that unlocks a design problem, and the real valuable piece of that, is not often something that is strictly shown by the data. It's something that emerges from the data. And so the judgment of a leadership team or a design leader is a huge part of being able to unlock value for the business. It's not just in the data. Like, the data's not going to save you. You still need some sort of judgment that goes over the top of that tells you which way to go. And so from a measurement standpoint, I think and I'm not sure if this is the right word, but it's almost like the resiliency of your organization, so that it's oriented towards the customer and the data that arises from that, but not a complete slave to it.
Yeah.
I
think you
agree
want
with
to
all
add?
of that. One thing I just realized, there's one place where speech data is different from something you would get from, say, the data you would collect on a website or something where people would click their way through. It's more like, if somebody's typing in, it'd be a different story. But if you actually have access to the raw user utterances when you're doing something with voice, you can actually analyze. It doesn't really matter if you're trying to figure out what people are doing and what they want to do. It's not just a question of just measuring, did they get from point A to point B, and did they finish a task or something? But you can do all this analysis on the transcribed data of what people are asking for, and actually get to what people are trying to do that they're not actually maybe successful in, because you haven't incorporated that part. And if you have something where you actually have to click a button to get to the next step, you're not going to know that necessarily unless you're doing other studies. But from the raw actual user data, from day-to-day usage, you can get that information out of the speech data if you're transcribing what people are asking for, whether they get it or not. So that's what kind of, speech is a little different from some of the other modalities that way.
Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit on you guys and ask you, something that Oonie said kind of triggered, and you talked about user-centric, right? A lot of us have probably come from and are part of engineering-centric companies. You can't be in the Bay Area and not be engineering-centric, right? How do you guys deal with that conflict of engineering-centric? And what I mean by that is, I'm an engineer, I know what people need, or it doesn't matter, right? It's about the features and the functions and not the experience, versus the customer-centric piece of that. I don't know who wants to go first, but who wants to throw their company under a bus here? Oonie, you're probably the safe one, right? No. But you're safe, right? But
yeah, because I can throw any company.
Yeah, you can throw all kind of clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've been hired frequently to come into engineering-led organizations who are wanting to unlock the potential of focusing on customers. And it is, and what we do is we try and define a design problem, like a very specific project that has clear edges. And we almost use that as a diagnostic going into the organization to understand how the organism of the company responds to something new or working in a different way. And we use that to tell us where then to look to reshape an organization. We were talking about the top-down approach or the must-have proof approach. And in engineering-led organizations, at least in my experience, you guys can tell me if you have a different experience, it's the proof in the pudding. Like, show me that this is better, whether better is faster, more efficient, more effective, whatever those metrics are. And then people get on board.
Anybody else want to? This is a safe environment. We're all friends.
We were talking about this before, and I think one of the things that we often have to do, and one of the the things that user experience professionals are really pretty good at is they keep asking the same question over and over, and it's, why are we doing this? What problem is this solving? And I think when we get into this, when you get into cultures where you're just making things and you're launching things and you're building features, you often lose the forest through the trees, right? And one of the things that I think we just keep asking, why? Why are we doing this? What and how? What problem does it solve and how? And that can often, I find you have to keep asking it, because it's not easy if you've always just thought about and focused on what you're making. It doesn't come naturally, and so you have to keep asking that question, and I think, anyway, that's one of the things I've found at eBay to be successful, is just keep asking what problem you're solving and why.
So I think when you think about what we call as user-centric, I think there are two very different perspectives of how users look at a product and how engineers look at a product. And when users come to a product, they have a certain intent in mind, like I want to do this. And to go back to the Alexa example, play a particular song, that's my intent. Whereas the way engineers would build it is there are probably 10 different steps involved in between. And in the old days, you would ask users to say, go to a browser, go to a website, search for the song. When the song shows up, click on the play button, and so on and so forth, right? Now, that's again a very simple example, but if you think of what Amazon Echo has done, it has abstracted all those 5 steps in between and say, you just tell me what your intent is, and I will do all the heavy lifting to translate it to how to make it work, right? And I think that's the analogy I like to take, where if you start from the user intent, allow the users to express intent in their own words, and then do all the heavy lifting as much as you can, I think that would result in a much superior experience. A lot of enterprise products work the other way around. They know how things work in the back end, and they try to surface all of that into the UI and ask user to pull like 10 levers to make things happen.
Okay. Are we getting close to Q&A? Somebody that's keeping track? We're okay? Okay, just didn't want to. I saw the screen change, so I thought maybe I was getting the warning. So an interesting question, kind of, in relationship to the last one. And I mean, this doesn't have to be a long answer, each one of you guys, but my question is, where do you guys sit? Where does your organization sit in the overall organization? And do you, have I'll say a voice in the product design?
Right.
And I mean, this is an easy one for you too, because I think, but.
No, this is a question we were talking about before.
Yeah.
I think this is really key, right? Wherever you are in the organization, it has to be equal footing. And I think what the most typical thing I've seen, I mean, currently my group is in engineering. I don't have a problem with that. But other design teams in the same company are under marketing, and it's like, it's the way it is in the company right now. I think what's important is wherever you're in, if you're in engineering or marketing and sales or something else, or if hopefully you're your own entity, right? You're your own department or group or something that you have equal say and the same kind of level of interaction with the team. I mean, what it really comes down to is respect in the team and having everybody be heard, whatever the organization is. The organization has to be set up in such a way that everybody can feel heard and respected and realize you're in here for a reason. You got hired because you're smart and everybody else is too. You should all have the same goal of creating the best thing. So I think the problem is, of course, if you're in a particular organization, there's going to be you're going to have to sort of follow some drummers differently from other drummers. Right? So.
And maybe only for your clients that you work with. I mean, what's kind of the most common model that you see,
Oh.
And maybe more importantly, is it, obviously they're probably coming to you because it's important, but,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all over the place. A lot of our clients are in marketing, which I think is interesting. But in product and the information side, they're kind of all over the place.
On our side, so I report to our chief product officer, and so we're part of the product organization. We're separate from the engineering organization, and that is a good thing and a bad thing. You know, one way we talk about it is we have a system of checks and balances where, you know, if the engineering organization goes after a certain thing a certain way, we have to be brought along and vice versa. So it actually works pretty well. I think one of the other things, you know, as teams get more distributed and decision making gets more distributed, I definitely have a seat at the table when it comes to planning for the company and our product experiences. But where it really matters is when you get down to those agile teams and the relationship between product manager, design manager, engineering manager, and then I think, and that's the typical tripod. And I think the thing that we're trying to do. And there's always consternation between like who's leading, right? Is the eng team leading? Is it the product team leading? Is it the design team leading? And one of the ways that we're actually helping to fix that, and this goes back to some of the other conversations, is we're bringing the customer into the room. So we're going from a tripod to four legs of a stool. And how does data and how does the customer become that part of that sort of that group of people, or that group of not even people, but just those legs of the stool? How do they sort of work together to become something that everybody's focused on? And so putting the customer in there in a virtual way, obviously, has been really, really helpful for us and those teams when they're making decisions down a little bit lower, to have more balance.
I would like to answer that slightly differently.
You can answer it however you want to.
So I think in most organizations, if you look at number of engineers, there are a lot more. And if you look at number of designers or number of product managers, they are relatively few. So if you want to get the right kind of experience for your products, you need to build a culture of user-centric thinking, which initially can be brought in by these few folks who think from the user's perspective. But you really need to evangelize it to every engineer, where every engineer starts thinking about it's his or her job to get the experience right. And from that perspective, I think there are two ways this could work. One is you really need to get somebody at a senior level who can create that strong voice for design. And then secondly, you need the right numbers. And these days, if you look at the latest Mary Meeker reports, they've been talking about what are the right ratios between design and engineering and product management. So when it gets to people embedded in those Scrum teams and Agile teams, you need the right numbers to have the right impact. So I think it really boils down to setting the right culture, which can happen with the top leader, and then the day-to-day operations.
And how do you guys deal with, because the numbers are never right? I mean, at least never to the companies that I've been part of. How do you guys deal with that? So I mean, the Scrum teams, you got to have somebody there. I mean, so it'd be interesting, Dave. I know you were talking a little bit about this in the.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways. Like on the research side of things, I have a qualitative user experience research team that is vastly outnumbered compared to the number of Scrums there are. If there's 400 and something Scrums, there are 500 something Scrums at eBay, and there's like 30 researchers. Yeah. But you need to have the customer in the room, and so one of the things that we're piloting, and it's been rolling for a little while, is that we're basically building training for all of the design folks, and starting with PMs, to learn how to do qualitative testing through something like user-centric.com, where it's kind of a virtual thing. And we're spending a bunch of time building that education system so that skill set can scale to match the needs of the business. It's not going to solve every problem, but it's one way to do it. The other way that, and it's a much more challenging way to go about it, but oftentimes you have to, is instead of what we call peanut buttering and just spreading a designer across 6 different Scrum teams, we look at the prioritization of what the projects are from a corporate standpoint, and the ones at the bottom of the list don't get staffed. And so you wind up creating experiences that are very, very far away from being standard, but it helps one get after the things that really matter to the company, and also illustrates to the company what happens when you don't have that. So there's a couple of ways we do it.
So thank
Okay.
you. Thank you very much.
Thanks.